Aloha and welcome. Today we're talking about a part of eschatology known as Fembelvetter. Many people who study eschatology, which is the study of the end of the world, you could say. It's really just the study of the end of things. For example, it's not the end of the earth or the end of the world doesn't blow up and explode, but it's a change. It's a cycle we go through where our world is reset geologically and in other ways. So many of us have come across the idea that's talked about in Norse mythology when studying the various ends of the worlds and all the different stories across our realm. Each one has its own flair, which I like. But the Norse talk about RAGNAROK. And you'll have to forgive my pronunciations. I'm still working on a lot of the names and stuff. But Ragnarok is how we commonly call that, where the gods get together and there's a huge battle between titans and giants and heroes of old and superheroes and supervillains. At least if you watch Marvel, that's kind of how the picture that they paint for us, right? Hey, good to see everyone in the chat. Hello, everyone. It's nice chatting with you before the show. So Ragnarok, right? We have this sort of Marvel concept, superheroes and comic book characters and stuff coming to life and battling one another here on Earth, which is amazing and a sweet breakdown all on its own. However, the part that I feel gets skipped over the most because people want to get right to the end of the world. They want to get right to the action. The source, one of the major sources, or two of the major sources for the stories about the Norse version of how our world goes through cyclical resets comes through the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda. And those are ancient Norse historical accounts from a long time ago, written by somebody named Snorri Sturluson. Try to say that 5 times fast. Anyhow, so I want to talk about Fembelvetter because the legend and the prophecy says specifically before the world ends, this is a huge omen, right? Many people ask me about the signs and the omens. What should you be looking for? I'm telling you right now, some things are slight. Right? Like the energy starting to slowly ramp up in our world, that's slight, right? People starting to change and become more aggressive and all of the gatherings and hoarding together and swarming of insects and animals and people. These are slight changes that we can pick up on, but there are grand scale changes that will be very obvious to anyone who is using believe our eyes. We believe what the television tells us or what it says in a magazine or a newspaper, right? So our minds are easily changed and our perceptions are easily adjusted through filters that are placed on us by the things that we encounter in the world that we live in through the system, right? So Fembelvetter, a huge winter precursor to the actual apocalypse. We're going to take a look at as much detail as we can find. There's not a lot of detail when it comes to Fembelvetter, right? That actually don't go into a lot of detail as to like what life is like during Fembelvetter. It's sort of assumed it's not great. It's very cold. So we're going to take a look at it. What happens? All right. So let me ask the chat politely if I could get a thumbs up, if you can hear me okay. If you can, great. Welcome to all the new people. Wow, I'm honored. Lots of new people are joining my channel, checking out my videos and stuff, binge watching, I guess. So that's good to hear. I'm very honored. All right. While I get the thumbs up from the chat, let's go ahead and do some screen sharing so you can follow along. Actually, I'm just going to read this first part and then we'll do some screen sharing here in just a bit. because the picture looks cooler than the words, basically. All right, so Fimble winter. That's what it's really called. Fimble is basically means awesome, great, so large that it's scary, so gigantic that it's frightening or awe-inspiring. You will be in awe. You have never seen a winter like this. You have only had images and pictures through our fantastic books and our movies and our stories. The worst winter that any of you have ever gone through is nothing in comparison to the things that lie ahead. If you've ever seen Game of Thrones, right? You know that they say that expression all of the time. Winter is coming, right? They're not talking about any old winter. They're not talking about next winter or, the regular winters that happen from season to season. They're talking about the winter, the great winter. Fimble winter. Fimble means great or awesome. Vetter is essentially winter. Sometimes it's called Fimble vetter, Fimble winter, etc., right? It's the great winter. Fimbulwinter is the harsh winter that precedes the end of the world and put an end to all life on Earth. Now, I'm going to do my own little asterisk. It's not all life on Earth, okay? In general, there will be many deaths, okay? Unfortunately. I like to look on the bright side, knowing that there's going to be a lot of death and a lot of issues and a lot of problems. That's why I want to talk about it, so we can get it ready for it, so we can be prepared, not be caught off guard, not be surprised, not be shocked or taken advantage of because we have a lack of knowledge. I want to bring these things to the table. So let's talk about it. The harsh winter that precedes the end of the world, or the resetting of the world. Fimbulwinter is 3 consecutive winters when snow comes in from all directions without any intervening summer. No summer in between the winter periods, just a long, drawn-out winter. The event is described primarily in the poetic Edda. In the poem Vafbrunasmal, I'm going to try my best. Odin poses the question to Vafbrunir as to who of mankind will survive the Fimbulwinter. Vafbrunir responds that Leif and Leifdrasir will survive and that they will live in the forest of Hodmimi's Holt. So, also, if I happen to get subscribers or members or chats, super chats or anything, I'm just going to say a huge thank you in advance and then, give shout outs at the end. That way I can just roll on through all of this because you guys, I'm so honored. Thank you. So let me rephrase what I just wrote. I'm going to put this up on the screen now so you can read along with me. All right. So the event described primarily in the poetic era or Edda. And basically, Odin is having a conversation with somebody else. The god Odin, the one-eyed god of Norse mythology, right? Thor's father, if you're a Marvel fan, or not. And the question is asked, who's going to survive? Who could survive such a great, freezing cold event that lasts for so long? And Odin, in all sincerity, answers truthfully and says, Leif and Leifdrasir, a man and a woman, respectively. Many of you are familiar with the Garden of Eden story, and that there is, even if you don't study the Bible, you've heard of Adam and Eve, the first man and the first woman. That just happens to be the most popular version of that story. There are many Adams and Eve archetypes throughout the world, with different names and different characteristics, etc. We're going to get to some of those here in just a bit too. So Odin says that Leif and Leifdrasir will survive. Let's see. Let me just double check to see if I have anything else I wanted to share with that. No. All right, cool. So next up, Odin poses the question as to who of mankind will survive the famous Fimbulwinter, or the mighty winter. The man responds that those survivors will be Leif. You see right there? Leif. That's pronounced Leif. It literally means life. Okay? So life will survive. That's what we're being told from these ancient breadcrumbs. And Leifdrasir, this is something of life, right? Thrasir essentially means lover, right? The lover of life, or Leif's lover, or the mate to Leif or life, right? Now, are these actual real people? I can't tell you, but what I can say is I feel very strongly that these two people that survive, that it's symbolic of all of us who survive, the chosen ones or the ones who make it or the victors, right? We overcome and when we survive. So in a way, it speaks to us. In another way, we're going to see a little towards the end of this video, it might be very literal. It's just that they're not human beings as we're used to them. It says they will hide in the forest of Hodmimi's Holt. Hodmimi's Holt. Hodmimi's Holt. Let me read the rest of this real quick. That they will consume the morning dew. So Leif and Leifthrazir, the Norse Adam and Eve, are going to hide in some place called Hodmimi's Holt. I'm going to tell you what that is in a minute. And they will consume the morning dew. That's what they're going to live off of. This is the goo. This is the residue. This is the ooze or the slime or however you want to see it. That seems to me to be a byproduct of the intense electrical discharge from Mount Meru when it's blasting up into the air. And there's this watery, slimy kind of substance that falls off of it, raining down from the heavens. In the Bible, I believe it's referred to as manna. And they will eat this because it's energetically amplified. It's pure energy, essentially. They'll consume the morning dew, which is where we get the soda name, Mountain Dew, and will produce generations of offspring. Odin asks what sun will come into the sky after Fenrir has consumed the sun that exists today. Fenrir is this huge, gigantic wolf, one of the Norse gods. I have theories about who I believe Fenrir really is because I believe all of these entities exist or did exist or will exist physically and manifesting in our world, right? Sometimes they might be a personification of Mount Meru. Sometimes it's a personification of the eye in the sky or the depressurization hole that blasts outward when the world depressurizes. So the two survivors, they go and they hide inside of Hodmimi's Holt and they eat Mountain Dew. They literally chill up there drinking Mountain Dew. Not the soda, okay? And produce generations of offspring. So Odin says that he knows that one of the prophecies is that the sun will be eaten, and he's asking what sun will replace it, right? To which the response is that Sol will bear a daughter before Fenrir assails her, and that after Ragnarok, this daughter will continue her mother's path. So this sun will die. It has to. It will. It must. Every single time the sun of every age dies, it goes out. But it is replaced with a new sun afterwards. Let's see. So, in addition to the response of what will happen to that sun, he also says that Surtur's flames have, after they've been sated, or after all of the flames go out, there's a lot of burning associated with this event. And we're going to see how we can reconcile massive worldwide burning with a massive worldwide winter. Right? How do those two things correlate? We'll talk about that in just a second. So Odin's sons are going to take his spot. Thor's sons are going to take his spot. Let's see. Anything else here? Not really. Okay, let's move on. Now, the first is this, that there shall come a winter which was called the awful winter. In that time, snow shall drive from all quarters. That means snow falls worldwide. For the most part, there's always exceptions and anomalies, but it is a worldwide winter. Frosts shall be great then, and the winds shall be sharp. Not just a regular winter. This is a blizzard for 3 years, right? At least. We're actually going to talk about how it's possible it might be longer than 3 years. The winds will be sharp, and there will be no virtue in the sun. Virtue in the sun means no warmth, no life, the sun is not going to get rid of this awful winter, basically. If anything, it might help to cause it, as we'll see in a minute. Those winters shall proceed 3 in succession, 3 winters in a row, and no summer in between. But first shall come 3 other winters. Oh, well, isn't this something, right? So it's not just Fimbulvinter, which is the 3 consecutive great winters in a row. there are 3 winters that happened before that. Now, these 3 that happened before that, it does not indicate that they are without a summer period or a break in between. So these 3 winters just before the great 3-year-long Fimbulvinter may have a break in between them, but these are going to be significant winters as well. These are some more of your signs and omens to look out for. It says, but first shall come 3 other winters, such that over all of the world there shall be mighty battles. See that? All over the world, other mighty battles and 3 other winters. In that time, brothers shall slay each other for the sake of greed, and none shall spare father or son in manslaughter and in incest. So, what's going on here? Well, if we start in reverse order, we've got the apocalypse. Ragnarok is kicking off, and all the cosmic entities have returned to give us an amazing show. That is the resetting of our world. Just before that, we have a great sign in the form of Fimbulvinter, or a 3-year-long winter period worldwide without any break in between, right? Now, I understand some people, as many people often do, will say, oh, well, it's just located to England, or it's just located in, or this has happened before. No. This has not happened. There have been cold winters. There have been long winters, but there has not been a Fimbulvinter like there is on the way. So what happens before Fimbulvinter? Well, we've got 3 winters before that, where the main thing that you're in that time is that there is hostility worldwide, right? So let me jump out of this real quick. Hold on. Here's my thoughts on this, right? I'm going to show you how I believe one of my theories that I'm working on as to how this all physically works on a map, showing you the world and how it all works, right? With the sun and how it all changes. But keep in mind, even today, even right now, the energy is amplifying. The energy is increasing, right? And that energy is evil. That energy is malevolent. That energy is frustration and angst and anxiety and depression and anger and confusion worldwide, all over the place, and it's growing. And that's my perspective. If it's not yours, that's okay. But that's what I'm seeing so far during my time here. And that's the perspective of many others who I have researched from. Going back hundreds of years, right? It's increasing exponentially. So, right before the end, we've got these great winters that are starting to kick off. The world's getting colder and colder. It doesn't seem too far-fetched that people will, under those conditions, they'll be stuck in their houses or wherever they happen to find shelter. They'll be stuck. They won't be able to go out into the streets or drive their cars or go traveling unless it's a huge trek and it's like a huge journey and it's epic, and very important. People are not going to do that. They're going to stay in their homes, and then they're going to have to and be forced to survive independently on their own. The system will try to, this is just me thinking off the top of the head, but the system will try to, keep people under control, even though it really cannot control anyone, because everyone is stuck because of the massive amounts of snow, and not just snow, not just cold, not just ice, but there's going to be weather worldwide in many of its most craziest, terrifying, and awesome forms that will throw the world completely off. Now, since I'm talking about that, I also want to say that this is a huge heads up. It says who will survive Fimbulvinter, right? Well, Leaf and Leaf Thrusir, and there's looters all over the place, and there's just anarchy worldwide, and there's the governments of the world are trying to enforce martial law and stuff. It's just the worst parts, right? During that time is when all of those who would be symbolically Leaf and Leaf Thrusir, right? They leave while the world is distracted. While the world is looking over there, Leaf and Leaf Thrusir know what's going on, and they take off. They go on an epic quest and a journey. Reza, hey, welcome to my channel. All right, so I just wanted to point that out. So let's bring up some more stuff to share now. Now, let's talk about possibilities of how this physically actually happens in our world today. I'm sorry that it's not to scale. I'm sorry that it's not the best map ever, the best drawing ever. We'll do our best here. But let me get my little arrow pointy deal. Okay, so here we have one of the many different types of maps of the world. This one is a top-down map. I like this one because I envision a dome on top of it in the sky and whatnot. And in my mind, there is a ring of ice that goes all the way around. In my mind, that ice actually continues all the way across over the top, right? But they've taken the ice away so that we can actually look into the world and to see the world. You don't have to share my cosmology or perspective in order to make it work according to other perspectives, we'll say, right? Anyway, let's start over here. Now, over here, you can see, let me make it a little bigger here. We're going to start on this section over here. So here's like the United States, just so you can get oriented, right? I'm going to explain all these things here in just a bit. Now, these dots, these bright white yellow dots represent the sun in the winter time. Okay, so let's back out a bit. Let's explain the seasons, right? So the sun goes around our world like that, but it actually is spiraling. So during the winter time, it goes from this yellow line and it pushes itself outward towards like Australia up here. You see that? So it starts to go further and further away. And what we see down here on the ground is around the time of the winter solstice, the sun every day and up until the winter solstice has dipped lower and lower and lower and lower on the horizon, right? So to ancient man, it looked like the sun was going away. It's going to disappear, right? Which might not be far from the truth. So, that is the winter. This is the Tropic of Capricorn around the outside. See this light blue ring over here next to the numbers? That's the Tropic of Capricorn. You could also call that the boundary of Capricorn. That is the sun's boundary. It is not to go past that. If it does go past that, which is what many of our ancient ancestors kept track of and looked out for and set holidays on to ensure that we were looking at these events and being careful and preparing, right? If it transcends that boundary, then it is going to continue transcending that boundary, which means this would be the year 0 here, or the first year would be before it transcends the boundary, right? So look at the 0 right there. That is a normal year. This is where the sun should stop. The solstice, the sol stop, the sun stops, right? It should be like the soul cease, like as in ceases to exist, because it's going to disappear. But this is a normal year right here. It stops here and then it slowly starts spiraling its way back in, right? All the way until it gets to this red line. This red line is the boundary of Cancer, or the Tropic of Cancer. It doesn't go past that during the Northern Hemisphere summertime, right? But let's go back to the 0. And just hold on for a minute. It's going to make more sense in just a bit, right? This is a regular year in the wintertime. The very next year starts off year 1 of that 3-year winter period of war and strife between all humans, okay? Strife is at its all-time high. Winter is starting to affect people, we'll say, and the sun has started to transcend its boundary. Instead of stopping right here at this blue line as it pushes out during the solstice, it goes a little further than it's supposed to, and then it comes back. However, when it comes back, it doesn't go all the way back to that red line. It stops short of this red line, right? So it pushes out further away. And this is during the winter apocalypse. Okay, there's a winter one and a summer one, and they alternate every other age or every other eon, right? Right now we're focusing on the winter one. I'm going to discuss the summer one here next. So, year 0 right there. That's not year 0. That's just a regular winter. The next winter, right? As we enter towards Fimbulvinter and Ragnarok, the sun pushes a little further than it's supposed to. It transcends the boundary. Then it comes back and it's shorter than it's supposed to go towards the north. And then it pushes out a little further, the year number 2. And if you take a look here, it's having an effect, or it is likely to have an effect on all of the ice that is around those outer boundary marker, right? That we call Antarctica, or the ice shelves, or the ice sheets, or icebergs, or whatever you want to call them, right? The sun is getting closer and closer to the ice that should stay cold. and it doesn't. So as you can see, the ice starts to melt. Does that mean that all of the dome is going to melt? Probably not, right? But the ice that is in those areas starts to melt. All of those ice shelves and stuff, they start to break off. They start to quickly melt and filter down into the ocean water, which it's going to have a huge disastrous consequence for our atmosphere and our weather. And I'll talk to you about that in just a minute. So regular winter. Next winter, it goes further. Next winter, it goes further. Next winter, it goes further. By the time we have hit the third winter, all of this fresh melted water has had enough time to mix into the currents that go around our world. And it has mixed into our ocean and has caused the saltiness of our ocean to be reduced. Okay? So it's less salty. Remember that. That's huge too. Hans, hey, thank you. Thank you. All right, now, those are the first 3 years. Now, the fourth year starts off Fimbulvinter. That's when most of that, all that stuff is all melted and stuff, and we're starting to feel the full effects of the changes and the earth changes that we'll be going through. The fifth year, even worse. The sixth year is the last one before, as you can see, the sun is pushing out and out and out and further out until it is gone. The sun disappears. It's a focal point in the sky. So it's getting so wide at its base beyond the sun that the focal point doesn't have, it's not above the land, basically, right? So it disappears. It goes so far down on the horizon that it's gone now, right? And this kicks off with Ragnarok, when the sky goes dark, when the apocalypse of every religion has a dark sky, no stars, no moon, no sun, etc., right? So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different years right here, right? This will be 7 years of famine, 7 years of need, 7 years of strife. Not very good, okay? Not fun times to be in. Now, we're going to come back to that in a minute. Let's talk about the summer apocalypse. Some people in the chat were saying like, hey man, I'd like you to talk more about the summer apocalypse as well. Well, let's do that right now. So this black and red line right there, this arrow, is the path of the sun during the summer apocalypse, or the summer solstice apocalypse, you could say, right? This one, the sun goes outward and leaves and goes all the way on the horizon away from us or southward until it disappears. This one's the exact opposite, right? So here we have a regular boundary where the sun stops in the summertime right above Mexico, essentially, right? And then it goes all the way back. But the next year, it transcends the boundary inward. It goes a little further, and then it stops short over here before getting to the Tropic of Capricorn. And then it goes inward more the next year, and then inward more the next year. By the time it gets to these last years right here, 4, 5, and 6, the sun is so hot because, as we talked about in my last video, it becomes like a laser. It becomes a point, the focus, or what we call the daylight, right, is skinnier and it's more focused, and therefore it becomes very, very hot. The sun starts to burn the earth and scorch the earth as it goes around for its final 3 turns, as it makes its way to the center of the world, the North Pole, which is represented here by this little blue circle, because that's what the sun will look like when it gets there. It will look like probably a dark blue ring in the sky with black in the middle of it, right? So the sun's face is seen as like disappearing and whatnot. So these are the two, just 2 examples, right? Just something I just made up. I'm sure this could be better, right? But these are 2 examples. The winter apocalypse over here, where the sun goes away and disappears, right? Obviously, during that one, it's not hard to imagine that we're going to have a great winter. We're going to have many great winters because the sun's getting further and further away from most of us, right? And it's not very strong either, even though the daylight is actually spreading. As you can see, I made the daytime very large over here. It's weaker. It's not strong sunlight like it would be over here, where it's very powerful and overwhelmingly strong, right? So the sun's getting weaker. It's going further and further away until it disappears. That's going to cause a great winter all on its own. The sun's getting further away. There's less heat, etc. And up here towards the north, it's getting very cold, right? So that stands to reason. But let's address how we could have Fimbulvinter when the sun is burning hot, right? That almost seems like a contradiction in the mind to begin with, right? But if you imagine that around the last 3 years of this cycle, that the sun is scorching the earth dragging along burn marks behind it, essentially, right? It's going to cause fires like you've never even seen before, right? So the trees, many of the trees, anything wooden, anything dry, anything that can catch fire that's out during the daytime, much of it will catch fire. And then other things will catch fire from those fires, etc., right? But it's only going to last for a short amount of time as it burns its way across our land, right? So it's going to be burning, but the daylight and the time of day is going to be shorter, and the sun is going faster. If you've seen, yesterday's video, we talked about how the sun increases in speed, right? And so academics says that the Earth is spinning faster now, or whatever. So the sun is going to be going faster across the land, but it will be burning everything in its small daylight underneath it, which gives us the shortening of our days. The length of time in a day is shortened. I'm sorry, I'm stuttering right now. But anyways, the length of time in a day is shortened. So imagine, follow the sun, right? It's burning. But then immediately after it burns, within only a couple of hours, nighttime comes, right? And it cools everything off. Now think about this. Oftentimes, after huge wildfires, there is actually an increase in rain or an increase in snow if you're in colder climates. The reason for this is because all of that burning from all the stuff that's being burned creates a ridiculously large amount of particulates in the air, little tiny particles, right, in the form of smoke or whatnot, that our atmosphere latches onto, right? The water droplets in our atmosphere, they latch onto that, and that's how we get rain. That's why it will rain so much or snow after wildfires is because you have all of these influx of particulates that are in the air now, which can grow snow, basically, or rain, depending on how cold it is. But it's going to get cold quickly because the sun's going to come and go and take off. And on top of that, it's also spiraling northward, so it's not in the same location every time it comes around. It's in a different location, right? So we will have a fimbulvinter, right? You're going to have all kinds of other weather as a precursor and leading up to this, okay? So there's going to be tsunamis. The ocean currents themselves are going to change. So there'll be waves where they're not supposed to be waves right now. I'll show you the ocean currents here in a bit. Let me see if there was anything else here I wanted to bring up. I'll actually come back to these. All right, I'll leave it on that one. Let's move on. Now, these are the currents that I was just telling you about, right? These are our ocean currents, which is really interesting. The red ones represent the warm ocean currents that seem to be making their way up to the North Pole, right? They go right through the UK, okay? Right past the UK, Sweden, all of those areas, and in between Greenland. Now, this right here is the reason why everyone in the UK is not freezing their butts off and it's just snowing all the time like in Canada. That's probably not even true. I'm sorry. I've never been to Canada. But look at where they are, right? They're directly across from Canada, basically, right? Almost up there towards where Alaska is. The reason why it's not that freezing up there is because there is warm air following a warm ocean current. These are the currents of our ocean. This is just sort of a rough draft, but you get the idea. There are warm currents and cold currents, and they depend upon many factors, but one of the strongest factor is the salinity or the salt content of the water. Let's read what it says here. So this is a website that asks the question, what if all of the ice in Antarctica melted, right? I'm going to skip down here and read this part. Sea chemistry changes. All of that melted ice is fresh water. Now imagine all of the ice melting like we talked about, right? Is fresh water and not sea ice, meaning that it would dilute the world's oceans, making them less salty. But not just that, it would have an effect on other dissolved chemicals and the pH or the acidity of the seawater itself. While these effects might be quite small, in the region of 2% on average, they will have an effect on some sensitive living creatures in the oceans and also on oceanic currents, which will be in part are driven by changes in salinity as well as temperature. So imagine that on both sides of the fence, right? During the winter apocalypse, the sun is going closer and closer towards Antarctica, traditionally, and melting everything, right? But whenever it gets pulled inwards towards the North Pole, it's also going over the oceans, burning, raising their temperature as well, over all of the oceans that it goes over. And also keep in mind, articles like this tend to talk about these types of things being a possibility over vast amounts of time, not all within like a couple of years or something, right? Which is really what it's probably going to be. These would have significant climatic effects of their own. The effect of ice melting on ocean chemistry would be greater as it was melting than when it was mixed, as the flood of fresh water would extend from Antarctica north, having much greater local effects. The extent of the local effects would depend on the rate of the melting, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let me translate this basically, right? They're saying that you would notice the changes first, where the closest to where the ice was melting. That's all they're really saying. But this right here is going to, has the potential to change all weather across the world, right? The weather across the world can, and will change suddenly from time to time. And most of the time, we're not prepared. We're not ready for it. So let's check out some other stuff here. What happens if the Atlantic current stops? This is affectionately known as the Atlantic current, or the North Atlantic current, as it goes all the way up there, making its way in the area, we'll say, of the North Pole. I have a theory as to why it goes up right in this particular area, which I'll share for you in just a bit. But if the currents were to stop immediately, the Atlantic currents, our highway of the ocean, if that were to just stop and be thrown into chaos, or it goes into flux, right? Which is the same thing that's happening above the ocean water energetically and within the earth itself, as the energy of the earth is starting to go through a polarity flip. When you go through a polarity flip, you have a neutral point of flux. The closer you get to that neutral point, the more flux you're going to have. So the earth, people, and everything in it follow suit with that flux, which is why you see so many changes happening so quickly in the world today. Let's see. It says there would also be impacts on fisheries and hurricanes in the region. Oh yes, there's going to be hurricanes too. The currents in the North Atlantic are part of a global pattern called thermohaline circulation, or the global ocean conveyor, basically. Now, I talked about leaf and leaf thrasier, the survivors. That's what we want to know about, right? How do we survive? What are we going to do? If this is true, right? One of the implications is that I am going to be affected. So we need to figure out how to not be affected, or how to be less affected than others so we don't die. How do we survive? Let's look at the ultimate quintessential example of the various versions of Adam and Eve. In the poem Vafbrunos Mal, collected in the Poetic Edda. I'm so sorry I butchered it, but in the Poetic Edda, the god Odin poses the question to one of the Jotun, asking who among mankind will survive when Fimbulvetr, the winter at the end of the world, occurs. The response is that they will be Leaf and Leaf Thrasier. The two will have hidden in the wood of Hodmimi's Holt. Now, when they say wood, it could mean a tree, but it also could be interpreted a forest, right? I'm going to talk to you about and tell you what that is here in just a minute. They will consume the morning dew as food from them generations will spring. In the Prose Edda, another story tells of Gangleri, King Gylfi, or Gylfi in disguise. Two people, Leaf and Leaf Thrasier, will lie hidden in Hodmimi's Holt during Surtr's fire, or Surt's fire. And that from these people there will be descended such a great progeny that the world will be inhabited. It only takes two, right? If you have two people and then they have babies and then those babies have babies, oh my God, it increases exponentially. It's not hard to increase the world's population very quickly, right? All right, so let's talk about this real quick. Leaf and Leaf Thrasier go to the wood of Hodmimi's Holt. A holt is a hold. It's like a safe place for keeping and storing things, right? It's a hold. It's a safety. There's many examples in our truth in movies that we've talked about, right? Like oftentimes it's like some sort of a mountain fortress, or it's often symbolized by a castle, right? Or a rampart or a tower, etc. So they go and they hide in this hiding place in the earth. Now, let's focus on that for just a minute. The expression Hod Mimi's Holt is commonly interpreted to mean the world tree, based on similar expression, which calls Yggdrasil Mimamidr, or Mimir's tree. So Hod Mimir's Holt is equal to, which is many of the experts on this have postulated and theorized, that this place where Adam and Eve are hiding, or where Leaf and Leifthrazir are hiding, is equal to the world tree itself. They are inside of the trunk, or the what do you call that when you chop a tree down and there's just like the stump? Oh yeah, it's the stump. Okay, so they're in the stump of the world tree, aka Mount Meru, Rupus Nigra, the volcano, the plasma volcano, right? So Hod Mimir's Holt is equal to the world tree. So they go and they hide in the world tree. So if you want to know where to survive, you just need to know where the world tree grows. But the prefix Hod means hoard or a treasure. Now, the reason it's associated with treasure, it is the ultimate castle filled with treasure, or a mountain filled with treasure, or a cave filled with treasures, right? Because there's literally treasure in this place, right? The electromagnetic blast for ages and eons has an effect on all of the earth that lines those walls, and it creates all kinds of precious metals and rubies and all that kinds of stuff, right? And there's other legends and lore about that cave, and other videos that I've done about that cave too. So you have to check out my Plasma Apocalypse playlist. Now let's continue on. So they hide in this cave of treasures, and it says Mimir is well known to own a well that feeds Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is the tree of the world, the tree of life, the world tree, the fountain of youth. And it is well known that Mimir, this god, lives under the world tree. So it is his world tree. So they hide in Mimir's hold, his tree trunk, the plasma volcano, basically, the hole, the inner earth entrance, basically. Therefore, metaphorically speaking, Leaf and Leifthrazir, or you could say life, right? Same thing, are precious treasures gathered together and hidden underground like a seed which lies dormant through the winter, waiting for spring, waiting to spring up, waiting to come up out of the ground and emerge into the post-apocalyptic world to repopulate it once again. Sound familiar? It says here in the Edda, Leaf and Leifthrazir lie hidden in the grove of Hord Mimir. The morning dews they shall have as meat. From them generations will spring. Lie hidden can also be interpreted as buried. Basically, they're underground, right? Or they don't have to be underground. It's possible that they just may be at the epicenter of a world storm. That's the eye of the storm. It is the place of the peaceful place during all of this, right? So where is that? That's the center of our world at the North Pole. Now let's check this out. We don't just have Adam and Eve. We don't just have Leaf and Leifthrazir. We've got many different quintessential versions, right? Ancient versions of these survivors that represent mankind and womankind, or humanity, right? There is Ask and Embla. Ask and Embla. In Norse mythology, Ask and Embla, or Askir ok Ambla, male and female respectively, were the first two humans. So, according to the myths and the legends in Norse mythology, Leaf and Leifthrazir represent the survivors of the future, you and I. Ask and Embla represent the survivors of the time long past, our ancestors, right? These two were created by the gods. The pair were attested in both the Poetic Edda, compiled in the 13th century from early traditional sources, and the Prose Edda, written in the 13th century by Snorri Sturluson. In both sources, 3 gods, one of whom is Odin, find Ask and Embla and bestow upon them various corporal and spiritual gifts. I call these superpowers. Also, some of them are just necessary for life. A number of theories have been proposed to explain the 2 figures, and I will certainly give you mine today as well. Let's look at the etymology. Askr literally means ash tree. So, the male version of Adam is seen as being a tree himself. That he started off, that we, by extension, are related to tree people, right? At least they were called the tree people. Were they actually made of actual trees that grow up out of the ground? Possible. Could it be symbolic for something else that may just look like a tree? Also, very probable, in my mind. Let's see. Also, we have a connection to the elm tree. Embla has a connection to the elm tree, right? So the ash tree and the elm tree. So basically, Adam and Eve are 2 trees, or came from 2 trees. If you hold on, I promise it's going to make sense in a bit. So let's skip down for a minute. Now, Embla can also be interpreted as vine. So the boy is a tree, the girl is a vine, twisting. Interesting. We're going to come back to that vine symbolism. It's coming up a lot in our breakdowns and research. All right, let me go down here real quick. This is from the Poetic Edda. It says, regarding the 2, soul they had not, sense they had not, heat nor motion nor goodly hue. Soul gave Otin, sense gave Honir, heat gave Lothar and goodly hue. So what does that mean? That means essentially they were like golem type creatures that did not have spirit, and they were imbued with spirit in the presence of these 3 gods. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. All right, so according to the Prose Edda, the 3 brothers, Vili, Ve, and Odin, are the creators of the first man and woman. The brothers were once walking along a beach and found 2 trees there. They took the wood and from it created the first human beings, Ask and Embla. One of the 3 gave them the breath of life. The second gave them movement and intelligence. And the third gave them shape, speech, hearing, and sight. Further, the 3 gods gave them clothing and names. Ask and Embla go on to become the progenitors of all humanity and were given a home within the walls of Midgard, or Middle Earth, the middle of Earth, the North Pole, the Garden of Eden, basically, right? Let's see. Ask and Embla have Proto-Indo-European origins. Embla can be interpreted as meaning a vine, right? Why is a vine important? Because it is the vine of light, okay? It is a spiraling, twirling helix type of a deal. It looks like DNA strands, basically, and it twists and it goes up and it touches the sky because that inner earth energy is being released through all of those inner earth entrances, especially those at the top of the world. Now, skimming through here. I want to read this part. Check this out. This is interesting too. A stanza preceding the account of the creation of Ask and Embla in Voluspa provides a catalog of dwarves. So as you're reading, you'll learn about these dwarves. Dwarves are very real. And, you know, in ancient Norse history, which is really what it is, they speak of dwarves and the dwarven race as being real. Same as elves and all of that, right? Stanza 10 has been considered as describing the creation of human forms from the earth. This may potentially mean that the dwarves formed humans, and that the 3 gods gave them life. So, it's speculated that the dwarves themselves created the physical bodies, right? Or the container, and then the gods, these 3 gods, imbued those containers or possessed those containers, right? Putting soul into it, breathing into them the breath of life. Let's see. There is a theory that humans are metaphorically designated as trees in Old Norse works. Examples of this includes when they're speaking about humans, they say things like trees of jewelry for women and trees of battle for men, due to the origin of humankind stemming from trees, Ask and Embla. Interesting. Let's get back to that one here in just a second. Next up, I'm going to close out some of these web pages so it's easier on my computer. Hopefully I don't need to reference them. Okay, we've talked about those. We talked about, is this Askanembla? Nope, that's Leaf and Leifthrazir. We've gone over them. This one is Hodmimi's Holt. We talked about that, the North Pole and the plasma volcanoes. Askanembla, here we go, boom. All right, next up, according to the creation myth as described in the Bundahashen, Okra Muzd, or Ahura Mazda. Okay, hold on. Let me back up. What are we talking about? First, we talked about we talked about how we're very familiar with Adam and Eve. Second, we talked about how there are many versions of Adam and Eve worldwide, right? Each culture has their own. Then we talked about Leaf and Leifthrazir. Then we talked about Askanambla or Embla. Now we're going to Mashia and Mashiana or Mashiana. And this comes from Zoroastrianism. Very old belief system and historical records. Let's learn and see about their first two Adam and Eve versions, right? Which are also the last two, okay? They're basically connected. The first two and the last two are the same. All right, so according to the creation myth, Ahura Mazda, the sixth creation is the primeval beast, Gayomart, who was neither male nor female. Akriman, the spirit of evil that dwelt in the absolute darkness, sought to destroy all that Ahura Mazda had created, and sent the demoness Je, or Jahi, to kill Gayomard. In this, she was successful, but the moon captured his seed before the animal died, from which all animal life then grew. From Gayomard's corpse grew a tree, the seeds of which were the origin of all plant life, and from the branches of which grew Mashia and Mashiana. They promised to help Ahura Mazda in his battle with Akriman, and gave birth to 15 sets of twins, which scattered around the earth and became the races of mankind. So that would be in the Avestan historic records of Zoroastrianism. That is another version of the survivors, Adam and Eve, that are said to grow from or be a part of some sort of world tree. Now, let's go over to Hinduism. All right, in Hinduism, in the Vedic tradition, Yama was considered to have been the first mortal who died and espied the way to the celestial abodes. Thus, in virtue of precedence, he became the ruler of the departed. All that means is he was the first human, and thus the first human to die as well. So he becomes the first ruler of the underworld because he's the first one to arrive. Thus, in virtue of precedence, he became the ruler of the departed. In some passages, however, he is already regarded as the god of death. Yama's name can be interpreted to mean twin. You see that? I'm going to talk about the twins here in just a sec too. So Yama can be interpreted as meaning twin, which means there's another one. And in some myths, he is paired with a twin sister, Yami. So even in Hinduism, in ancient Sanskrit writings, we have a story of the first two humans that also there's this twin relationship, right? Sometimes they are twins, sometimes they have twins, right? But it also would make sense that they would be twins, right? If they both came from the same thing, they would be twin-like, right? All right, so let's get rid of that one, I believe. One moment, let me just skim this real quick. Yeah, that's basically the highlight of that one. I don't want to get too deep into that. All right, now let's talk about these twins, okay? So far in the storyline worldwide, we've got something that all of the stories, or many of them, have in common, which is preceding the events of the apocalypse itself. There are signs and omens that the chosen, or the elect, or the woke, or those who have the eyes to see, those who understand, right? Those who can read the signs and the omens, they see it, they know it's time to go, and they leave wherever they are worldwide to go on a mass exodus, leaving their countries, leaving their places of residence, and all of them together headed towards the North Pole, the only place of safety and refuge that is alluded to from my studies when it comes to surviving the apocalypse. They all go towards the North Pole. They all go towards this mysterious island that has a tall, dark volcano, a plasma volcano, that you can go into and escape the shell or the outer surface of our world. You can go into the world and you can hide out in there. Also, you just might be safe being on that island in proximity to the volcano. I'm not sure. But we definitely have that. Now, we have this twin symbolism, right? They always say a boy and a girl. What do you think is just one guy out there, right? Like some one guy, some random dude out there just happens to be the one that's going to make it. And he just happens to have a girlfriend, or he gets one along the way, or he meets some random girl at the North Pole and they happen to like each other. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's a possibility. It's also a strong possibility that there are many people that make this journey, right? Many men, many women, but the two in particular that live and reside at the North Pole, that are born there, that are created there, that they don't come from other places in the world, that they might not be human beings. Now, let's take a look at some maps to see what we're talking about. Now, this one is Gerard Mercator. Right? He's made some of my favorite maps to look at. Oh, it's hard to see him over there. See him? So there he is holding up a globe of the Earth. But check this out. He's holding, if you look at it, he's holding this little compass deal. But the compass is not pointing at these strange four lands in the middle, which happen to have a volcano right there. You see that? There is a volcano. There's a volcanic mountain. There's even a little hole right there in that mountain to let you know there is a hole right there in the earth. These are the ancient four lands that were once depicted quite often on maps of the world, split by four rivers. They're there. But the interesting thing that I find, he is not focusing on those ones. He's not focusing on the North Pole. He's focusing on something else. Check this out. Where is his little compass touching? Not the North Pole. It's actually touching off here to the side, but it says Polus Magnetis. Well, that means magnetic pole. Isn't that something else, right? So this is a magnetic pole, wherever he's touching right here. This one in the center, traditionally, Rupus Negra, is called the Magnetic Mountain. So that's another magnetic pole, right? Or a center of electromagnetic activity, right? I believe there is a third one directly across. If we follow this line, somewhere in this area over here, we should find a third one, because these are the places where those beams of light, the inner earth energy, shoot out. They spring forth. These, if there are three of them, would represent those three gods that give life to those who live on the island between them. So let's see if we can find another map that corroborates that. This one happens to be one of my favorite ones. This is called the Urbano Monti map, right? I'm going to scooch it over here off to the side so we can see. First, let's familiarize ourselves. This is the North Pole right here. Let's zoom in so we know where we are. This is the North Pole. As you can see, there's a G there. I quite often point that out. It's kind of blurry right now. Let's give it a second, see if it fixes itself. Fix yourself, map. All right, well, anyways, just trust me. There's the letter G right there, and I've talked about that symbolism many times and how it relates to the Freemasons and Masonry and the survivors of cataclysms. All right, so let's zoom out a little bit so we can see those four lands so you can become oriented, right? All right, boom. So here at the top of the world, we've got 1 land, 2 lands, 3 lands, and 4 lands. They are all separated by 4 rivers right here. Now, let's see where Mercator was pointing to. Here we have, boom, America. See that? So it's off to the right of America, between America and what looks possibly to be Greenland or some other island country over there to the side. So let's find that, right? Right here, this is America. There, let me show you. There's Florida right there. Pink. Florida, Maine, Canada, right? So it should be off to the side over in this area, somewhere over here. Let's zoom in and see if we can find a magnetic mountain. Boom. Right there. How do I know? Well, it's called Huriarka or something. Husiarka. I don't know. I can't read that one. But it's been rubbed off. There's other words there. Do you see that? It says polo magnete. Magnetic pole. A mountain sticking straight up out of the water. Some random peak is right there. Right where he's pointing to on this other one. And it also says magnetic pole. Let's see if we can find its counterpart. It should be directly across. So right up here, there's that little mountain. Now keep your eye. I'm just going to scooch it straight down. Now, right here, we would have Mount Meru or Rupes Nigra. That is another one. Let's keep on going across and see what we find. Well, look at that. Isn't that something? There's something over here. Let's zoom into this. Hopefully it won't be blurry. Now, it's going to be upside down. And I'm not going to flip it around because I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. But there is another one on the other side. A magnetic mountain. Polo de Magnete. Magnetic pole. It is a mountain shooting up out of the water with a hole in it. A plasma volcano, as I affectionately call it, right? So, if this is true, it stands to reason that there is a beam of light shooting out of this one. There is a beam of light shooting out of the exact center. And directly across, there is a third beam of light. This one and this one over here, these are the anode and the cathode, electrically speaking, of our world. And they help us to live in this world by maintaining the world. They maintain the salinity and the salt content of our water. They provide air, and these are sometimes seen as the gods of wind and stuff, right? Now, when the electricity shoots up and out of them, right now it's charging, so it's going down, and you don't see any light at the North Pole except for the auroras. But when that light shoots up out of the world, these want to touch. They go out, and there's a beam of light in the middle. These two meet. They curve, and they create an electrical arch, which from far away looks like bowed feet, like a big bowed feet or squatting feet of a huge cosmic stick figure that is being drawn out in the sky. So keep that in mind, right? We've got the anode and the cathode. Which one's which, I'm not absolutely sure of at the moment, but I am figuring it out as I go. Let's move forward a bit. Now, check this out, right? If one of these mountains shoots up and it has a stick figure of its own, right? Smaller than the central one, these are the two witnesses, right? To that central mountain. So you see it up here, I've got this sort of mock-up of the North Pole, right? You see the rivers coming out of it, and there's a black mountain shooting up out of the middle, right? These mountains are black magnetic mountains because all of that electrical energy is shooting out in a blue beam that touches the sky. These are the pillars of the world. And they're seen as holding up the sky and preventing an apocalypse or saving people or whatnot, right? So they're black because there's all this electrical energy and stuff. And what it does is it actually pulls the dirt. It pulls the earth upwards towards the heavens, but it becomes solid. So it literally pulls itself up higher and higher. We're going to talk more about it in a minute. But here, as you can see, I sort of did this compilation. So there's 1, 2, and 3. There's that one that we looked at, Polo de Magnete. Here's this one. And then this is sort of a mock-up drawing. This one is what they are symbolically in different stories. These are the two lampstands, as they're called. They are lights. They light up the world. They're very bright. They provide light during dark times, right? they're considered the two witnesses on either side of the central savior or heroic type figure or godlike figure, right? There's three of them, two smaller ones that create an arch. These are like the angels on the Ark of the Covenant. If you've ever seen Indiana Jones, they have these two angels and their wings touch. They bend over and touch each other because it's an electrical arc, right? And electricity is a huge part of this too. It can create boundaries and barriers and stuff, very dangerous, but also not dangerous if you understand how it works and how to work with it. So these are the two lampstands. They are also called the two trees that bear witness to Jesus or the ark or whatever, right? And then also this right here, let me zoom in on this. If we go up a little bit, you can see this is a map, a fictional map, right, of the Lord of the Rings land called Middle Earth. On one side, there used to be a huge towering tree of light. The tree was made out of light, basically. And this gets back into way before the Lord of the Rings, way before the Hobbit, during the times of what's known as the Silmarillion, right? When the creation story of Middle Earth and the surrounding lands. So during that time, they had two lights, two that were trees, one on one side of this island, one on the other side of this island, and right there in the middle, a volcano, right? Which is also what you see whenever people draw it out. Here's another map. This one's a real map here. And there's many, you can get little glimpses of it. You can see it says Polus Magnetis right there. And boom, there's a volcano right there with the hole in it, right? Many stories where people go and journey to the center of the earth in different ways. They go in through the top of a volcano, right? All right, cool. So we talked about some of that stuff. We talked about how Adam and Eve might actually, and in addition to being like symbolic of the human surviving race, might actually be two cosmic entities that are born in this garden paradise area at the North Pole, right? And that's why they say that we come from trees, right? We go to the North Pole, we hide in the base or the mountainous areas of these huge cosmic light forms that look like plants and bushes and trees and thunderbirds and stick figures and squattermen and ladders and vines and all this stuff that as they're painted and cartoonified over time, right? And then those who don't go up there, there are survivors scattered around the rest of the world, right? Living in probably more harsh conditions, but eventually those survivors will come from those trees. There will be tree people. There will be the people from the trees. Now, what's really interesting is the word tree, the Proto-Indo-European root word is deru, which is where we get the word tar from, like tar that comes out of a tree or sap, right? Tar means tree. It means deru, which means tree, or the druid, the druids. Anyways, Tartaria is basically what I'm getting at. For those of you who are looking into the Tartarians and who are these strange, weird people that migrated all over the place and stuff, that's who I believe they were so far. Now, check this out. Let's go back to this map. I want to show you something real quick. This one. So let's just pretend and let's just say, right? Let's just pretend that this is all true. That this right here is the North Pole. Let me scooch it over a bit here. So here we've got the North Pole, magical, mystical, hidden island or whatnot. Here we've got a plasma volcano. This is an island in and of itself. Okay, so that's an island. Over here we have an island. Now it stands to reason that those survivors who came to this island or to this island over here and had babies. Now think about this. If this is an anode and the other one is a cathode or vice versa, then the energy will match. Okay? What does that mean? That means that the entire island will be positively charged or negatively charged, right? Not good and evil, just positive and negative. Also, what that means for those things that are born on those islands is that they are likely, if it's a feminine energy, that's likely to bear more women on that island. And if it is a masculine energy, it is more likely that the children born will be men. So, do we have any ancient records, myths, or legends about islands completely filled with only men or only women? We sure do. Let's talk about just a couple examples, because I'm sure you've heard many. The land of maidens. says here in Wikipedia, the land of maidens, or the land of women, the island of women, the Isle of Ladies, among other forms and names. This all makes so much. I'm so happy right now. I love it when a plan comes together. Anyways, I'm being goofy. Let me continue on. Serious. All right. The land of maidens, or the land of women, other names, etc., is a motif. Means it's a type. It's so prevalent that this is just the type that many people talk about. A motif in Irish mythology or Irish mythology and medieval literature, especially in the chivalric romance genre. Well, duh, right? I mean, come on. I don't know. An island full of only men or only women, that might sound like a paradise to some of you, but to others of you, it might sound like not a fun place to be. Anyways, that's a fun one to joke around with. All right. The latter often also features a castle instead of an island. Interesting. That's because it's a mountain. It is a mountain coming up out of the water, which is an island in and of itself. It's also drawn as being a fortress, a citadel, a safe place, right? A place where you can go in and hide or whatever, and that you can call your home. That's why they draw it as a castle instead of an island at times, sometimes known as the Castle of Maidens. Interesting. Irish mythology, the Celtic underworld in the myths and folktales from ancient Ireland can be reached inside a hill. Hold on, let me read that again. The Celtic otherworld in the myths and folktales from ancient Ireland. Oh, the otherworld. Okay. So it's like the upside down in Stranger Things. Can be reached inside of a hill or through the depths of a lake or across the sea. I'm not sure if I wanted to read all of this. Let me just skim through real quick. Yeah, I think we've already kind of proven the point there. Oh, the Arthurian legend. This is interesting because I didn't mention this. John Michael, hey, thank you. Appreciate you. I didn't mention this when we were breaking down King Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail, which I will always call it that. I'm pretty sure it's a Mandela effect that it's now called Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That sounds not good. That does not sound like, I'm sorry, I'm super digressing, but anyways, I broke down that movie, right? Which you see on the movie, I put Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail because I remember it being a mouthful. Anyways, there's actually a scene where I think it was Galahad or somebody, I can't remember the name, but he goes into a castle, which was, what was it called? Castle Thorax or Anthrax, right? Castle Anthrax. And that's where all the women were. This is what, that's an example of what we're looking at here. That was the Arthurian legend. It says a land of maidens in an other world is not restricted to Irish myths. A Middle English dream vision known as the Isle of Ladies recounts, I know it's behind me, so sorry, recounts a dreamer's visit to a magical island where only women live. Like in the Irish tale, The Voyage of Magil Duin, the dreamer from the Isle of Ladies encounters his own lady on a glass island, who has accompanied the queen of this isle from another island where apples grow that sustain the longevity of these women. Mag of Cascadia, thank you. So check this out. Let's rewind real quick. In addition to there being these islands of men or islands of women only, right? That are sometimes portrayed as being castles or strongholds only filled with men or only filled with women. They also talk about and have a strong connection to apples, right? They're not just regular apples like, red delicious apples or the green ones at the grocery store. These are spiritual apples. These are electromagnetic apples. These are magic apples. These are holy apples, right? Which sometimes is also said to be like the fruit that Adam and Eve shared between them, right? They lived on apples. Well, if we think back, and we remember the story of Leaf and Leaf Thrasier and how they would survive drinking Mountain Dew or eating the Mountain Dew or whatever, right? It's very similar. I don't believe that they were apples. I believe that they were electromagnetic balls of lightning or plasma, like ball lightning, basically, right? And people went on journeys to find these spiritual apples, these holy apples, these etheric apples of the gods, right? And this is what they lived off of, because there is energy shooting up out of the earth, and the byproduct of it is nutritious for us. It's pure energy. You eat it and bam, wow, it's like you had 5-hour energy and a Red Bull and all kinds of stuff all in one. I don't know if it'll make you, that crazy. All right, I'm digressing. Let's get back on track. All right, so that was very interesting to check out. I'm going to skip past that. Let's go over to the Americas and let's talk about the Iroquois. I love the Native Americans. I do. I love all of their stories. I almost like all of the different various Native American legends and word of mouth stories and stuff more than the written accounts, if you can believe that, because there's so many. It's easy to compare them all to get a better picture of the bigger picture, basically, right? Here is the Iroquois creation myth. We've talked about various creation myths and the men and women that were created. Let's see if the Iroquois have something involving a man and a woman, maybe twins, maybe trees. Let's check it out. Long before the world was created, there was an island floating in the sky, upon which the sky people lived. They lived quietly and happily. No one ever died, or was born, or experienced sadness. However, one day, one of the sky women realized she was going to give birth to twins. In the center of the island, there was a tree, which gave light to the entire island, since the sun had not been created yet. He tore up this tree, creating a huge hole in the middle of the island. Curiously, the woman peered into the hole. Far below, she could see the waters that covered the earth. At that moment, her husband pushed her. She fell through the hole, tumbling towards the waters below. Water animals already existed on the earth, so far below the floating island, 2 birds saw the sky woman fall. Just before she reached the waters, they caught her on their backs and brought her to the other animals. Determined to help the woman, they dove into the water to get mud from the bottom of the seas. One after another, the animals tried and failed. Finally, little Toad tried, and when he reappeared, his mouth was full of mud. The animals took the mud and spread it on the back of the big turtle. The mud began to grow and grow and grow until it became the size of North America, aka Turtle Island. Then the woman stepped onto the land. She sprinkled dust into the air and created stars. She then created the moon and the sun. The sky woman gave birth to 2 twin sons. She named one Sapling. Remember? Tar, sap. He grew to be kind and gentle. Now, before I read the rest of this, okay, hold on. One is usually good, the other one's usually bad. One is usually black, the other one is usually white. One is usually male, the other one's usually female, etc., right? It's not always that way, but it's because of the anode and the cathode. He grew to be kind and gentle. She named the other Flint. Interesting. And his heart was as cold as his name. They grew quickly and began filling the earth with their creations. Sapling created what is good. He made animals that are useful to humans. He made rivers that went 2 ways, and into these he put fish without bones. He made plants that people could eat easily. If he was able to do all of the work himself, there would be no suffering. However, Flint destroyed much of Sapling's work and created all that is bad. He made the rivers flow only in one direction. He put bones in fish and thorns on berry bushes. He created winter, but Sapling gave it life so that it could move to give way to spring. He created monsters, which his brother drove beneath the earth. Eventually, Sapling and Flint decided to fight till one conquered the other. right? They meet there in the middle. Neither was able to win at first, but finally Flint was beaten. Because he was a god, Flint could not die, so he was forced to live on the big turtle's back. That's the bad guy being forced to live in America. Occasionally, his anger is felt in the form of a volcano. Are we seeing some connections? Oh my God. I'm seeing so many. I love this. This is like my hallelujah. This is when I get teary-eyed. I love it. God, man. I love it when the stories match up. I love that so much. God. Man. The Iroquois people hold a great respect for all animals. This is mirrored in their creation myth by the role the animals play. Without the animals' help, the Sky Woman may have sunk to the bottom of the sea and the earth may not have been created. What a beautiful story that is. Man, oh, that's so good. All right, hold on. We're going to go another place. Instead of America, let's take off from America. Let's go to Samoa, right? I love globetrotting with all of you. The creation story of the Samoans. Let's check this out. What is the origin of the world according to the Samoans? Well, I'll read it to you. The Samoans explain their island's colonization differently from anthropologists. Imagine that. The Samoan myth of creation, still passed on from generation to generation, is as follows. In the beginning, there were only the heavens and the waters covering the earth. The god Tagaloa looked down from his place in the sky and considered creating a place on the earth where he could stand. Okay, so there's a cosmic god above that wants to stand on the earth, and he needs to create something to stand on. Let's check it out. So he made a resting place by creating the rock called Manu Atele, or Greater Manua, or Manu. Interesting. I'm going to tell you what Manu means. Actually, let's just check it out real quick. So if we go to Proto-Indo-European root of mountain, it is men, or sometimes mon, right? So oftentimes mountains in Latin and stuff are called mon, M-O-N. Excuse me, I got hiccups. So mountain, mon, min, all very much the same. They mean to project, which means that min, as in mankind, could also be interpreted as being projections. That gets into simulation theory, but let's go back to the ancient origin according of the world and mankind, according to the Samoan mythological view. Tagaloa was pleased at his work and said it would be well to still have another resting place. So he divided the rock Manu Atele, which is Rupas Nigra. He divided it. So Rupas Nigra, the plasma volcano, becomes split. It's now the split mountain, which it's often portrayed in movies, as I've pointed out. So he splits this mountain. Says he divided the rock so he would have other places in the sea that would serve as stepping stones. From these pieces of rock, he created Savai, Opulo, Tonga, Fiji, and the other islands that lie scattered about the wide ocean. Now, let's pause right there. I know that you've heard like Fiji and stuff, right? Oftentimes when we hear of modern locations or names of modern locations, keep in mind that before the settlers came, those places either had no names or likely had different names. The reason they have the names that they do today, in part, and probably mostly, if you ask me, is because the settlers, wherever they came from, the North Pole, right, brought with them their traditions, their descriptors, their names. If they saw the biggest mountain in the area, bet you it's going to be named after Mount Meru. It's going to be named after the plasma volcano at the middle of the world, whatever they used to call it back then. They're going to take that and honor their lineage and honor their history and try to keep who they are alive by bringing it to the new place. So they're going to name the new place Tonga and Fiji and etc., right? All right, cool. Now, when Tagaloa had finished fashioning all of these islands, he returned to Samoa. He measured the distance between the islands of Savai and Manua and found it to be too great. So the distance between this island that's being talked about and this island was too great. So let's see what happened. So he placed a rock halfway between and designated it as a place of repose for the chiefs. What does that mean? A place of repose for the chiefs means it was a mountain of the gods. Right in the middle. You have damn, I forgot the name. Olympus, essentially. The Olympus archetype is seen in Samoa. He called this last island Tutuila, which means the island of Tutu, or Tet, the Tet Island. If you look at the look at the letter, the glyph Tet, it's a circle with an X in the middle, or the circle island with the 4 rivers. That's what that is. Tagaloa then sent a sacred vine. Oh, let's check this out. I love this story. I'm so giddy right now. I love this story. Tagaloa sent. This blows my mind. Like, I don't know how the whole entire world doesn't see these connections, but I'm so excited for everyone who does. Anyways, Tagaloa then sent a sacred vine to spread over the rocks. The sacred vine would be plasma, right? I mean, possibly. It could be other things too, but I'm seeing plasma correlations. The leaves of the sacred creeper fell off and decayed, and things like worms grew from them. Now, important to check this out. Things like worms grew from them. Something that is worm-like is also plasma, right? Plasma moves like a worm. That's why plasma in the sky that occasionally touched down and caused fires and stuff was referred to as fire verms, or worms. Okay? So the leaves of the sacred creeper fell off and decayed, and things like worms grew from them. Tagaloa saw that the creeper had given birth to worms that had neither heads, nor legs, nor breath of life. So God came down and provided these worms with heads, legs, arms, and a beating heart. Thus the worms became men. Tagaloa took a male and a female and placed them on each of the islands that he had created. Meaning there was a male and a female, and he stuck the male on the male island, right? It's blowing my mind. And the female on the female island. The man, Sa, or Sha, and the woman, Vai, were placed on one island, and the place was called Savai. U and Polu were placed on another, and it became known as Upolu. The couple, Tutu. Tutu is the same as Tet, right? Or it's like Tutankhamun or Tutankhamun, etc., right? And Ya were the first inhabitants of Tutuila. So Tutu and Ila were basically the Samoan version of Adam and Eve, the first inhabitants of the island of Tut or Tet. All right, that's pretty much all I wanted to read from that one. Let's move on to the last one, the Gargarians. So we talked about how there is an island full of women and stuff, right? Can we find islands filled with men? We can. There are a people of men, a tribe of only men, known as the Gargarians, or, depending on how you say it, the Jarjars, the Jarjarians. In Greek mythology, the Gargarians, or the Gargarenses, were an all-male tribe. Make that bigger. Damn. Sorry. Anyways, the Gargarians were an all-male tribe. They copulated with the Amazons, which is the traditional all-female islanders, annually, every year, in order to keep both tribes reproductive. Varying accounts suggested that they may have been kidnapped, raped, and murdered for this purpose. Okay. Or that they may have had relations willingly. Probably, right? I mean, I'm just guessing, but I mean, I could see that. The Amazons kept the female children, raising them as warriors, and gave the males to the Gargarians. I don't need to get into details because we get the point, right? An island of men, an island of women. We talked about the holy mountain at the middle of the world that is traditionally called Mon, sometimes man, sometimes men, sometimes mean. It depends on how you say it, which means to project, a projection, something that projects up out of the waters, an island. Talked about the creation myths of the Samoans, the Iroquois people. That was probably my favorite one. I love that story. The islands of men, the islands of women. And I know some of you in the chat are probably like, the island of man. Oh my God. Right? Because I know there's an island of man. We talked about the anode and the cathode of the earth, or the island of man and the island of women, how they generate. And I want some of you who are more chemically inclined, you're good at chemicals and chemistry and stuff like that, or even electromagnetics and how things work, specifically in electrolysis. Imagine that this is an electrolysis system, okay? You have an anode and you have a cathode, and you also have electrolyte being the salt water around it, so that electricity can pass between the two. Now, I want you to take the small scale versions of what you know about all of the science and all of the research behind electrolysis and apply it to this. And then take that on the small scale and apply it to the myths and the legends and the stories and the reality of the world that we live in. And I bet you your mind will be blown. This map is Urbano Monte, for those of you who'd like to check it out. I always go to David Rumsey Map Collection. It's a sweet website. You can zoom all the way in. It's amazing on like every map. They have lots of maps collected there. We talked about Gerardus Mercator and how he's not pointing to his famous mountain in the middle of the world on the Forelands, the mysterious island. He's pointing down here to an alternative island. Let's see. We also talked about Fimbulvetr, right? Fimbulwinter, the great winter, the awe-inspiring winter. We also talked about the different ways that this could possibly happen, right? Our sun is responsible. The fluctuations that happen, anytime that you hear on the news or anywhere else, I mean, you know, take everything with a grain of salt. But when you hear something's happening with the sun, something's happening with the moon, I would tune in. I would check it out because everything is fractal. It will affect us. It is a sign. It is the earth speaking and singing to us, prophetic whispers and lovely music, basically. So we talked about how they could possibly happen. If you need more information, I also drew the sun over here. I can't see if you could tell that, but I drew the sun and its progression during the winter apocalypse. Oh, thank you, Uncommon Truth Shaman. And I also drew the sun in its progression during the summer apocalypse, right? One Hit Gaming. Hey, welcome. Good to see you. Let's see. Anything else? We talked about the islands. We talked about the North Pole. We talked about how it's on these other maps. I believe that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going anywhere. Don't flee. Don't get all like, don't get in end of the movie mode. We're going to leave pretty soon, but don't go yet. Okay, cool. I just wanted to get it all set up so I don't have to multitask and look at all this stuff on the screen. I would like to just give a bunch of shout outs. Okay. I haven't been following the chat, but anyone who's new to my channel, you should know that I have a very close relationship or an affection for what I call the Good Vibe Tribe. I would like an emoji flood, please, if you don't mind. Good vibes. Pump it up in the chat. Not just for us, not just for you who are there, not just for the new people here right now, but for all of the future people. Whoever you are that may have just seen this video months after it was done, years after it was done, I don't know. But I would like to encourage all of you to know that it's not just us, it's not just me, but we know that you're out there. Okay? Don't feel lonely. Don't feel like you're by yourself. You have brothers and sisters out there of a similar vibration. And this is our time to hang out. And I I don't take any of it for granted. All right, cool. Please let me know in the comments what your favorite thing was, if you learned something new, or if you want to add to it, and like, you know, tell me more about your professional opinion on the anode and the cathode of the world, or any of the things that we've spoken on. I would love to hear more from all of you. Thank you so much for all of your support. Now we're about to leave. Thank you for the donations. Thank you for becoming members, looking at my website, which I'm always adding to. My website is awesome. You got to check it out, jdrimmers.com. And if you want to know more about the specifics of the plasma apocalypse, but you want it all in a condensed form, getting right to the point, I wrote a book about it. It's called Ancient Oblivion, The Plasma Apocalypse. Thanks for hanging out with me. I had a blast as usual, and I can't wait to see you again. Until next time, I'm jdrimmers, saying good vibes and goodbye.
So hard to fade away. I try so hard to fade away, but something's forcing me to stay. It'd be easier for me if I turn away to flee. Oh, but there's something holding on, the way of being long gone. There's so many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Far too many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Time to wake up, time to wake up, baby. Time to wake up, time to wake up. Time to wake up, time to wake up, baby. Time to wake up, time to wake up. I know I should have done this, should have quit this long ago. Can't stand another heartbreak, but it's time to let it go. It'd be easier for me if I turn away to flee. Oh, but there's something holding on, the way of being long gone. There's so many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Far too many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Time to wake up, time to wake up, baby. Time to wake up, time to wake up. Time to wake up, time to wake up, baby. Time to wake up, time to wake There's so many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Far too many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Time to wake up, time to wake up, baby. Time to wake up, time to wake up. Time to wake up, time to wake up, baby. Time to wake up, time to wake up.
You in this vast multiverse.